Your grandmother kept a cast iron skillet on the back burner and a coffee can full of bacon grease next to the stove. And if you grew up in a black household in the 1970s, you already know what that grease was for. It turned leftover cornbread into something golden and crispy. It made hush puppies that could fill you up for a quarter. It flavored things that grocery stores today have never even heard of. Back then, snacking was not about a bag from the gas station. It was about what your mama or your auntie could pull together between meals using whatever was already in the kitchen. Fried bologna with hot sauce on white bread, sweet potato pone wrapped in wax paper, crackling bread broken into chunks and passed around the porch. These were the snacks that kept whole neighborhoods going, and almost none of them show up on a menu anymore. If you love soul food and the memories that come with it, go ahead and subscribe, because here are 60 forgotten soul food snacks from the 1970s no one makes anymore. Peanut butter and jelly on saltine crackers was what happened when the bread ran out, but hunger didn't. You spread peanut butter on one cracker, grape jelly on the other, pressed them together, and hoped it held. It rarely did. The saltine snapped under the weight, and you'd eat the whole thing in pieces, licking your fingers between bites. But the salt cut through the sweet jelly in a way soft bread never managed. In the 1960s, a box of saltines cost 15 cents, and peanut butter ran about a quarter, making this one of the cheapest protein snacks a mother could stock. Kids ate these after school, before dinner, and sometimes instead of dinner when weeks ran long. Crackers stayed crisp for weeks. Peanut butter didn't need the icebox, and the jelly lasted until the jar was scraped clean with a spoon. Number 21, your auntie's potato salad with mustard yellow. The recipe lived in one woman's head and changed by mood. Mustard, mayonnaise, sweet pickle relish, hard-boiled egg, paprika on top, never raisins, never apple. The bowl was a Tupperware big enough to bathe a small dog in. She covered it with the same lid she had owned since 1969. She carried it down herself, set it on the table herself, lifted the lid herself, because if you opened her bowl and stuck a wrong spoon in, she would know. You would hear about it next Sunday. Children knew not to ask whose salad it was. The shape of the bowl told them. By 1990, the auntie had moved out to Yonkers. The niece took the recipe wrong, and the bowl sat empty on a high shelf in a kitchen no grandchild visited on Saturdays. Number 23, cornbread and buttermilk. This was not a recipe. This was a ritual. You crumbled day-old cornbread into a tall glass, poured cold buttermilk over it, and ate it with a spoon. Some families added a sprinkle of sugar. Others added nothing at all. A man in Tupelo, Mississippi, ate this every single night before bed for 43 years. His wife made the cornbread fresh every other day, and the buttermilk came from a local dairy that sold it for 20 cents a quart in 1965. Food historian Adrian Miller has noted that thick, cultured buttermilk was once the foundation of this dish, but the thin, commercial buttermilk that replaced it could never deliver the same tangy richness. For some, the mention of cornbread and buttermilk sparks deep memory. For others, it sparks pure confusion. That gap between recognition and bewilderment is the distance between one generation and the next. Your grandfather called it supper. Your grandchildren have never heard of it.
Tea time. Lemon chess squares carried the tang of fresh citrus into parlors where neighbors gathered for quiet afternoon visits. Based on the old-fashioned chess pie, these bars combined tart lemon juice with sugar, eggs, and a touch of cornmeal to create a dense, custardy filling. Poured over a simple shortbread crust and baked until golden, the squares were sliced neatly and dusted with a whisper of powdered sugar if it could be spared. Their bright flavor cut through the heaviness of traditional sweets, offering a refreshing note that matched the clink of teacups and the soft murmur of conversation. Hostesses prized the recipe because it kept well at room temperature and could be prepared a day ahead, making it perfect for church socials and family reunions. Children who tasted them for the first time often asked for seconds, surprised by the burst of sunshine flavor. Though rarely baked now, these squares remain a symbol of hospitality and quiet elegance, a reminder that a little lemon and patience could turn humble ingredients into something unforgettable.
But if skillet corn was about summer abundance, souse meat was about the discipline of using everything and wasting nothing. Souse was made from the parts of the hog that remained after the better cuts had been claimed. The ears, the snout, sometimes the feet, all boiled down until the collagen-rich cooking liquid gelled on its own when chilled. The meat was pulled from the bones, seasoned hard with vinegar, black pepper, sage, and crushed red pepper, packed into a loaf pan and waited overnight until it sliced clean. Eaten cold on white bread with yellow mustard and a slice of raw onion, it had a savory, dense quality that divided eaters into those who had grown up with it and those who had not. Souse had been a hog butchering day tradition in black households since before the Civil War, a practice rooted in the necessity of preserving and using the whole animal. The butchering days are gone. The souse that came from them is nearly gone too.
Barbecue pig's feet turned a humble cut into a celebrated delicacy at backyard cookouts during the 1970s. The feet were simmered for hours until tender, then slathered in a tangy tomato sauce spiced with vinegar and pepper before finishing on a smoky grill or under a broiler. The slow cooking melted collagen into a silky texture that made every bite rich and satisfying. Neighbors gathered around the fire as the sauce caramelized, filling the air with a fragrance that signaled both patience and celebration. Served with cornbread and cold drinks, the dish embodied the spirit of summertime gatherings where music, laughter, and the smell of smoke lingered well past sunset. Though some now overlook this ingredient, those who remember know that barbecue pig's feet carried the flavor of community and the creativity of cooks who transformed simple ingredients into feasts worth remembering and bringing back to modern tables. Pineapple upside-down cake, dazzled with caramelized fruit and a retro glamour that felt just right for a Saturday night gathering or a holiday feast. Brown sugar and butter melted into a sticky glaze at the bottom of a cast-iron skillet, ready to cradle bright rings of canned pineapple and scattered maraschino cherries. A light vanilla batter was poured on top and baked until golden, allowing the juices to soak upward and infuse the cake with tropical sweetness. When the pan was flipped, the reveal always earned a gasp as the glossy fruit topping shimmered like stained glass. Served slightly warm, each slice combined tender crumb with a syrupy tang that no frosting could match. In African-American homes of the 1970s, it stood as a link between old-fashioned hospitality and modern convenience, using simple canned fruit to create a dessert of striking beauty. Pineapple upside-down cake reminded families that a little drama in presentation could turn an ordinary evening into a celebration, remembered long after the plates were cleared.
Molasses and biscuits was the breakfast black children ate when butter was too dear and jam was luxury. Biscuits came from the oven, hot and steaming, split open with fingers, their soft insides waiting to soak up whatever sweetness was available. Molasses, thick and dark, was drizzled from jars that sat on every poor family's table because it cost less than sugar. The flavor was earthy and deeply sweet, almost smoky, coating the tongue with richness that white sugar never matched. Children poked holes in their biscuits and watched the molasses pool before each bite. It was simple food carrying centuries of tradition. Molasses provided iron that growing children needed. This wasn't dessert, but breakfast, a reminder that poverty didn't mean going without something sweet.
Sweet potato bites topped with mini marshmallows were dessert-like appetizers that blurred the line between side dish and treat, their orange flesh and white topping creating visual appeal that drew children like magnets before dinner was served. Mothers would bake sweet potatoes until soft, then scoop out the flesh and mash it with butter, brown sugar, cinnamon, nutmeg, and vanilla extract until smooth and creamy. The sweetened sweet potato mixture was spooned into mini muffin tins or shaped into small balls and placed on baking sheets, each one topped with a single mini marshmallow that would toast golden brown. As they baked, the marshmallows puffed up and turned golden, creating that characteristic toasted flavor that children associated with campfires and summer fun. In the 1970s Black households, these bites represented creativity, taking traditional candied yams and reimagining them as finger foods children could grab.
Dirty rice earned its name from how it looked, flecked brown and gray from chopped chicken livers and gizzards stirred through every grain, and anyone from a Louisiana kitchen knew the dish by sight before they tasted it. The livers were sautéed fast until firm but still pink, then chopped fine alongside gizzards simmered tender for an hour. The Holy Trinity, onion, celery, bell pepper, went in next, diced small and cooked in rendered fat until soft. Cooked rice was folded in with green onion, garlic, cayenne, and a splash of Worcestershire nobody measured. By the 70s, dirty rice showed up at reunions, holiday tables, and Friday suppers alongside fried fish. It was never the centerpiece and did not need to be. It made everything else on the plate make sense, and the cook who got the seasoning right never had to ask if people liked it. The empty pot answered. Beef tripe stew was not for the faint of heart, but those who grew up eating it remember the dish with deep affection. Tripe required thorough cleaning and long cooking to become tender, but the result was worth every minute of preparation. The honeycomb texture held onto flavorful broth, making each bite an experience. Black cooks prepared it with tomatoes, onions, garlic, and plenty of pepper, creating a stew with Caribbean and Southern influences intertwined. Some versions included potatoes or hominy to stretch the meal. The dish was considered special occasion food despite its humble origins, served when the family wanted something different. The smell was distinctive, earthy, and rich, announcing to the neighborhood that serious cooking was happening. Tripe stew taught children that texture and flavor mattered more than appearance. Number 13, boiled peanuts in a quart mason jar. A cook in Charleston pulled green raw peanuts straight from a farmer's burlap sack at the market in August, dropped 2 pounds of them in a heavy pot, covered them with water, dumped a half cup of salt in, and boiled them for 4 hours on the back of the stove. The shells went soft. The peanuts inside turned the texture of a cooked bean. She ladled them hot into mason jars, screwed on the lids, and the jars lined the pantry shelf for the rest of the year. A child pulled a jar down on a hot Sunday afternoon in 1960 and ate a fistful straight out of the brine, sucking the salty water off the soft shells before cracking them open with his teeth. The practice came over from West Africa in the holds of slave ships. Your kin had eaten them on the porch in 1899. Modern Carolina's gas stations sell them in a styrofoam cup for $4. Cornbread crumbled into a tall glass of cold buttermilk separated insiders from everybody else. If you knew, no explanation was needed. If you didn't, none would be enough. The cornbread had to be day-old, fresh dissolved into mush instead of holding its crumble. You broke it into chunks, dropped them into the glass, poured cold buttermilk over the top, and ate it with a long spoon, chasing soaked pieces to the bottom. The tang of buttermilk against the grit of cornmeal was savory, sour, and oddly refreshing in the deep South heat. Some added a pinch of salt, others crumbled raw onion into the glass, which sounds wrong until you've tried it. Through the 1940s and 60s, this was an after-work snack for laborers and a between meals holdover for kids who couldn't wait for supper. It used yesterday's bread, needed no cooking, and the buttermilk was already in the icebox from that morning. Number 18, curry goat in foil trays. On Caribbean black blocks in Crown Heights and Flatbush, the foil tray that drew the longest line was the curry goat. Goat shoulder cubed, seasoned with Jamaican curry powder, Scotch bonnet, thyme, and a tin of allspice from a shop on Nostrand. It cooked 4 hours on a back burner in an apartment that smelled like a country your auntie had left in 1971. The tray came down with a ladle stuck in it. White rice underneath, gravy on top, a piece of hard dough bread on the side to push the gravy onto the spoon, the way you would push a memory onto a page. Black American kids tasted it and went home asking their mothers why their own food did not have that smell. The trays sat next to the collards. Both got finished. By 1995, the cook was a citizen. Her children spoke without an accent, and the goat had moved into a takeout box on Church Avenue for $9. Number 18, hoe cakes with cane syrup. This was the Saturday morning snack that disappeared when Ida Mae Simmons of Greenwood, Mississippi, passed in 1987. She made her hoe cakes on a cast iron griddle that sat directly on the stove eye. Her batter was nothing but white cornmeal, a pinch of salt, and enough water to make it pour. She dropped it by the spoonful and fried each cake until the edges turned brown and lacy. Then she stacked them on a plate, drizzled cane syrup over the top, and set them on the table without a single word. The name hoe cake comes from the old practice of cooking cornmeal batter on the flat blade of a garden hoe held over an open fire. Enslaved field workers made them this way because it was the only cooking surface they had during the workday. By the 1960s, the hoe was gone, but the name remained, and so did the simplicity. 3 ingredients, no measuring. Her granddaughter tried to make them in 2004 and could not get the edges right. She said the batter looked the same, but the griddle did not sound the same when the batter hit it. That sound was the recipe. Fried bologna was an after-school institution that required no advanced planning and no trip to the store. It was already there, in the meat drawer, waiting. A thick slice from a bologna roll, scored around the edges so it wouldn't cut when it hit the heat, dropped into a dry skillet over medium-high until the bottom blistered and browned, then flipped once. Yellow mustard on white bread, the fried slice laid on top, sometimes a little hot sauce if you were old enough to reach it. The whole process took 4 minutes. Bologna, mechanically processed pork and beef, was one of the most affordable proteins in black households throughout the 1960s and 70s, a Depression-era staple that had never entirely left the refrigerator. Children who came home to an empty house knew how to make it without being taught. The skillet was there, the bologna was there, the bread was there. It required nothing but presence and hunger, which children had in reliable supply every day at 3:15.
Turkey and andouille sausage jambalaya brought African and Cajun roots together in one pot, a perfect reflection of cultural blending in the 1970s. Long grain rice cooked slowly with onions, bell peppers, celery, and a smoky mix of turkey and andouille sausage until each grain absorbed the spicy stock. Paprika, thyme, and cayenne layered the flavor, while the sausage released juices that seasoned every bite. Families loved it because it fed many mouths with modest effort, and leftovers tasted even better the next day. Served at gatherings or simple weeknight suppers, it carried the warmth of Louisiana traditions and the heart of African-American creativity. The rhythmic stirring and bubbling pot became a soundtrack of anticipation, drawing everyone to the table before the meal was done. Today, its legacy remains strong, a dish that proves shared heritage can create unforgettable flavor that deserves a place on tables once more. Banana pudding with vanilla wafers delivered pure comfort in a chilled dish that always seemed to disappear before anyone could ask for seconds. Ripe bananas were sliced thin and layered with crisp vanilla wafers and creamy custard made from milk, eggs, and a hint of vanilla bean. Each layer softened as the pudding rested, allowing the cookies to turn cake-like while the bananas infused the custard with gentle sweetness. A crown of meringue or whipped cream sealed the top, lightly browned in the oven or served fresh from the refrigerator depending on family tradition. Sunday dinners and church socials alike relied on this dessert to close the meal with something cool, sweet, and familiar. Children loved sneaking extra wafers, while adults traded stories over heaping spoonfuls. Banana pudding with vanilla wafers captured the heart of community gatherings in the 1970s, proving that the simplest combination of fruit, cream, and cookies could create a dessert experience that felt luxurious, comforting, and timeless all at once.
Pot liquor and cornbread was breakfast born from last night's greens, the rich broth saved because throwing it away meant wasting nourishment itself. After collards simmered all day with ham hocks, the liquid left behind was dark, salty, and packed with vitamins that poor families desperately needed. Mothers heated it up and served it with crumbled cornbread soaking in the middle. Children sipped it like soup, the cornbread dissolving into something soft and savory that warmed them inside out. This wasn't just thrift, but wisdom, stretching one pot of greens into 2 meals when money was scarce. The broth carried iron from the greens and flavor from the pork. Families believed it gave strength for the day ahead. Pot liquor breakfast was proof that nothing in a poor kitchen ever went to waste.
Cocktail sausages wrapped in flaky biscuit dough emerged from ovens as golden crescents that children grabbed from cooling racks, burning their fingers but unable to wait. Mothers would roll out refrigerated biscuit dough, cutting it into strips before wrapping each small sausage like a tiny gift and arranging them on greased baking sheets. The wrapped sausages baked until the dough turned golden brown and flaky, the fat from the sausages creating pockets of rich, meaty flavor. Some families brushed the tops with melted butter and sesame seeds before baking, adding extra richness and subtle, nutty crunch. In Black households during the 1970s, these sausage rolls appeared at every major holiday, their ease of preparation making them perfect for busy cooks managing multiple dishes. Children loved them because they were small, portable, and perfectly sized for little hands.
In the 1970s, pig ear sandwiches were sold at juke joints, neighborhood bars, and roadside stands across the Black South, and the people who ate them did not apologize. The ears were cleaned, boiled for hours until the cartilage softened, then sliced thin and either pickled in spiced vinegar or deep fried until the edges went crisp. Served on white bread with hot sauce, mustard, and dill pickles. The sandwich had a texture nothing else matched. Crunchy where the fat rendered, tender where the meat pulled apart, tangy from the vinegar. The dish came from the nose-to-tail tradition that had fed Black families since slavery, when the ears, feet, and tails were the only cuts passed down to the quarters. At places like the original Cozy Corner in Memphis or Nameless stands in the Mississippi Delta, a pig ear sandwich and a cold drink was Saturday night. Today, those stands are mostly gone. The ears are still cheap, but the hands that slow cooked them have moved on. Chicken gizzard stew turned an often discarded organ into something families genuinely looked forward to eating. Gizzards were cheap at the butcher counter, sold by the pound for far less than other chicken parts. They required long cooking to become tender, but that time transformed their chewy texture into something almost silky. The gizzards were browned first, then simmered with onions, garlic, tomatoes, and potatoes until everything melded together. Some cooks added carrots or celery, while others kept it simple with salt, pepper, and bay leaves. The gravy that formed was dark and rich, perfect for ladling over rice or biscuits. Children who grew up eating this stew developed a taste for organ meats early. The dish represented kitchen wisdom, knowledge that parts others threw away could become dinner. Butter rice with fried eggs was breakfast, lunch, and dinner depending on what the family needed and what the pantry held. Mothers would cook rice until fluffy, then stir in generous amounts of butter until each grain glistened and carried that rich, creamy flavor. A fried egg was placed. On top is runny yolk breaking open to create a natural sauce that children mixed eagerly into the rice below. Some mothers added a splash of soy sauce or a sprinkle of black pepper for extra depth. This dish was the answer when money was tight but bellies needed filling, providing protein and carbohydrates in one inexpensive bowl. Children loved the ritual of breaking the yolk themselves, watching it flow golden across the butter-slicked grains. It was honest, humble food that required no pretense but delivered complete satisfaction. Frozen Kool-Aid cups turned a 5-cent packet of drink mix into a summer business that kept entire blocks buzzing. Every neighborhood had a house where somebody's mama filled Dixie cups with Kool-Aid, stuck in popsicle sticks, and sold them off the porch for a dime. Cherry was the best seller, grape ran second, tropical punch was for the bold. You mixed it stronger than the packet said, doubled the sugar, poured slow so the stick stayed centered while the cups froze overnight. By noon, kids lined up on the sidewalk with coins earned sweeping porches or returning bottles. The trick was peeling the cup without breaking the ice. Squeeze just right, let the edges give, pull the paper down in one strip. Some bit straight through, others licked slow, letting the color stain their lips purple for hours. It was a childhood economy built on sugar, ice, and 5-cent packets, and every kid on the block knew exactly which house had the coldest cups. Number 24, red beans and rice in a foil tray. The pot started Friday night on a back burner in a 4th floor walk-up in Brownsville. Red beans soaked in a coffee can. A ham hock sat on top, jaw still attached. Your grandmother went to bed and woke up to a pot that smelled like a sundae she had not had since Lake Charles. Saturday morning, the rice went in a separate pan because rice and beans needed their own dignity. Both came down the stairs in a foil hotel pan set on a folding table. A spoon stayed in the tray all afternoon. The serving woman did not need to ask twice. She knew who was coming back for seconds. She knew who would say no and mean yes. The recipe came up from Louisiana on a Greyhound in 1962 and ended on Sutter Avenue by 1986 when the building got sold and the elders moved out. 2 generations, 1 pot. Number 22, boiled peanuts. Back in those days, if you drove through rural Georgia, Alabama, or South Carolina in late summer, you would see hand-painted signs on the side of the road that said nothing but 2 words, boiled peanuts. A woman in Americus, Georgia, made hers in a dented stock pot on a propane burner set up in her front yard. She used green peanuts straight from the field, still caked in red Georgia clay, and boiled them in salt water for 4 hours until the shells turned soft and the peanuts inside were tender like a cooked bean. A brown paper sack of them cost $0.25 in 1966. The practice of boiling peanuts has roots that stretch back to West African cooking traditions, where legumes were boiled and seasoned as a common preparation. By the time the peanut became a major Southern crop after the Civil War, Black families had already been boiling them for generations. That roadside sack was not a snack, it was a history lesson you could hold in your hand.
Peanut brittle with sorghum was the kind of candy that snapped between your teeth and stuck in your memory long after the last piece was gone. Farm families boiled sorghum syrup until it bubbled thick and dark, its grassy sweetness richer than plain sugar. Roasted peanuts were stirred in quickly, the hot mixture poured across buttered pans and spread thin with the back of a spoon. Children waited wide-eyed as the candy cooled, eager to crack off shiny amber shards that caught the light like stained glass. Revival gatherings and county fairs always had a table piled high with these sweet, brittle sheets, often wrapped in wax paper tied with string. The sorghum not only gave a deeper flavor, but also reflected the ingenuity of cooks who relied on what they could grow rather than expensive refined sugar. Each bite carried the flavor of late summer fields and long evenings under oil lamps. To taste it again would be to remember the easy companionship of neighbors sharing stories while the brittle snapped between happy hands.
Fried green tomatoes in these kitchens were not a Southern nostalgia dish. They were a practical answer to tomatoes that weren't going to make it to red before the first frost. Every Black household that kept a kitchen garden understood the math. The tomatoes left on the vine when September turned cold were either going to be picked green and cooked or lost. Sliced a 1/4 inch thick, salted, dredged in seasoned cornmeal, sometimes with a little flour mixed in for a lighter crust, and fried in a thin coat of oil or drippings until the cornmeal turned golden and the tomato softened inside without going to mush. The tart, almost grassy flavor of the underripe tomato against the savory crust made something that tasted like the end of summer in a single bite. By the time the film came out in 1991 and restaurants started putting fried green tomatoes on every menu, the dish had been in Black Southern kitchens for well over a century, dressed up with neither story nor apology.
Sweet potato pie carried the soul of family tradition to every holiday table, its earthy sweetness and warm spices making it an unshakable favorite. Roasted sweet potatoes were mashed to a silky smoothness, blended with brown sugar, butter, eggs, and a hint of vanilla and cinnamon. Poured into a flaky homemade crust, the filling baked until the surface set with a gentle wobble, and the scent of spice filled the house. Served with or without a dollop of whipped cream, it embodied the essence of Southern comfort and African heritage. In the 1970s, no Thanksgiving or Christmas felt complete without at least one of these pies cooling on the counter, ready to be sliced after a hearty dinner. Grandmothers passed down secret touches, maybe a splash of orange juice or a pinch of nutmeg, that made each family's version unique. Sweet potato pie was more than dessert. It was memory, history, and love baked into a single golden circle that brought everyone back for seconds and sometimes even breakfast the next day.
Leftover rice with milk and sugar was breakfast that turned last night's side dish into this morning's meal. Cold rice was spooned into bowls, covered with milk and sprinkled with sugar until it became something like cereal, but heartier. Children ate it cold in summer or warmed gently in winter, the rice softening until each spoonful was creamy and sweet. It was breakfast that only happened in houses where food couldn't be wasted, where yesterday's dinner became tomorrow's meal without question. The sugar transformed plain rice into a treat, and milk added the calcium growing children needed. Families with nothing but rice could still serve breakfast, stretching one ingredient across 2 meals. This taught children that resourcefulness meant seeing possibility instead of scraps.
Bacon-wrapped water chestnuts delivered crispy, salty, and slightly sweet bites that children fought over despite not knowing exactly what water chestnuts were, the bacon exterior and crunchy interior creating mysterious but delicious combinations. Aunties would drain cans of whole water chestnuts, wrapping each one with half a strip of bacon and securing it with toothpicks before arranging them on baking sheets. Before baking, each bundle was brushed with a mixture of brown sugar and soy sauce that caramelized during cooking, creating a sweet salty glaze that coated the bacon. The water chestnuts roasted until the bacon was crispy and rendered, the fat dripping away while the sugar coating turned golden brown and slightly sticky. In Black households during the 1970s, bacon-wrapped water chestnuts represented sophistication borrowed from magazines, recipes that seemed fancy but remained simple for home cooks. Children loved them because bacon made everything better.
Before the rest of the house stirred, there was tomato gravy simmering on the back burner, and you could smell the bacon fat cutting through the sharpness of canned tomatoes from under your blanket. The dish needed nothing expensive, just drippings saved in the coffee can by the stove, a tablespoon of flour stirred until it browned, and a can of stewed tomatoes crushed by hand into the skillet. A pinch of sugar took the acid down. The gravy was poured thick over white rice and eaten with a spoon, sometimes alongside fried eggs or salt pork. It came from Depression-era black kitchens where one can of tomatoes fed a household of 8, and it traveled north to Detroit and Chicago inside the memories of women who never stopped cooking it. Through the 70s, it held on as a weekday standard, the kind nobody wrote down. You made it the way your mother showed you, and if you asked for measurements, she would shake her head and say, "Pour until it looks right." Neck bone stew carried families through the coldest months when money was tight and bellies needed filling. Pork neck bones were cheap at the butcher counter, often sold for pennies a pound because most people overlooked them. But black cooks knew better. They understood these bony cuts held deep flavor, waiting to be coaxed out through gentle simmering. The bones were browned first, then covered with water and left to bubble alongside potatoes, carrots, onions, and celery until the meat became fork tender. Some families added turnips or cabbage to stretch things further. The smell alone announced dinner was ready, drifting through every room like a warm invitation. Children hovered near the stove, waiting to tear meat from bones with their fingers. This stew proved the humblest ingredients could become something worth gathering around. Number 20, fatback chew. A strip of salt-cured pork fat pulled out of the brine bucket, sliced thin, and laid on a cloth on the back porch to dry. The strip went hard, the way a piece of leather goes hard. Your grandfather kept a few in his shirt pocket on a long tractor day in 1948, the way a modern man keeps a granola bar. The salt drew the water out of his mouth. The fat coated his throat. A man could chew a strip for 2 hours in a hot field and not get hungry. Children chewed them on the porch after school, hands sticky with grease. The strips kept for weeks in a tin on the kitchen counter. The cure was the salt, the dry porch air, and the time. By 1980, doctors were calling salt pork a cardiovascular crime. The men who carried fatback through the Mississippi Delta lived into their 80s on a diet of greens, cornbread, and pork fat. The research walked back its warnings 1 decade at a time, and the man who chewed the strip in 1948 had been right the whole way through. Fried corn started with a sharp knife and an ear fresh from the garden. You held it upright on the cutting board and sliced downward, letting kernels fall, then scraped the cob with the back of the knife to release the milky starch that made everything come together. That starch thickened the corn as it hit the bacon grease, turning loose kernels into a creamy golden dish that tasted nothing like anything from a can. Salt, pepper, maybe a pinch of sugar if the corn wasn't sweet enough on its own. Through the 1950s and 60s, when gardens behind shotgun houses overflowed with Silver Queen and Country Gentleman varieties, fried corn showed up daily from July through September. Kids ate it warm from the skillet, spooned onto bread, or straight from the pan, barefoot in kitchens where the window stayed open because there was no other way to breathe. The woman who made it best in your house never said what she added. After she stopped cooking, the corn never tasted that way again. Number 20, macaroni and cheese baked in church pan-sized casseroles. The pan was the same one that had carried bake sale lasagna to the basement of Mount Olive Baptist for 10 years. Deep, dented in 2 corners. It could feed 30 children. The macaroni cooked in a stock pot before sundown. The cheese was a brick of cheddar grated by hand while the radio played WBLS. Layer macaroni, layer cheese, layer macaroni, layer cheese. Evaporated milk poured over, paprika on top, into the oven for 45 minutes. The crust was the prize. The corner pieces were promised to the woman who carried the pan like a tribute. Nobody disputed it. The thing is, the recipe was never written down. It was passed down by watching. By 1988, the deep pan had cracked, the church basement was rented out for funerals only, and the recipe got reduced to a shoebox pan version that fed 8, not 30. Number 24, molasses pulled candy. Before there were corner stores stocked with penny candy, there was this. A woman in Macon, Georgia, made it on her back porch in 1964 using blackstrap molasses, a cup of sugar, a tablespoon of butter, and a splash of vinegar. She boiled it to the hard cracked stage, poured it on a greased plate, and when it was cool enough to touch, she buttered her hands and pulled it. She pulled it like rope, stretching and folding it until it turned from dark brown to a golden amber. Then she snapped it into pieces and laid them on wax paper. Molasses was cheap because it was a byproduct of the sugar refining process, and for generations, it was one of the few sweeteners Black families in the rural South could afford. The pulling was the part that required the skill. You had to know the exact moment when the candy was cool enough to handle, but warm enough to stretch. That moment lasted about 90 seconds. Your grandmother did not set a timer, she just knew.
Buttermilk cornbread sticks brought the smell of hot iron and sweet corn to countless African-American kitchens, where cast iron molds shaped each piece into crisp-edged fingers, perfect for dipping. The batter of stone-ground cornmeal, tangy buttermilk, and a little lard was poured into sizzling molds so the edges crackled as soon as they touched the heat. Children loved pulling the golden sticks apart, steam rising as they slathered honey butter across the ridges. They were the ideal companion to collard greens or a simple bowl of beans, hearty enough to stand alone as a snack when money was scarce. Street vendors sold them wrapped in newspaper at church homecomings, and neighbors traded secrets about which cornmeal gave the best crunch. The sound of batter meeting hot iron became a music of its own, echoing through small kitchens on quiet evenings. Today, these molds often sit forgotten in cupboards, but a warm cornbread stick still delivers a taste of the past that is both humble and magnificent.
Sugar cane wasn't a snack you asked for. It appeared when someone came back from the right place with a stalk tucked under their arm. In Louisiana, Mississippi, and parts of Georgia and South Carolina, where cane was still grown through the 1970s, a length of sugar cane cut from the field and carried home was understood by every child in the household without explanation. You stripped the outer skin with a knife or your teeth if you didn't have one, bit down into the pale inner stalk and chewed out the sweetness. The juice was cool and green sweet and tasted like nothing else. Not candy, not fruit, something more fundamental than either. West African agricultural traditions had brought sugar cane cultivation knowledge to the American South through enslaved people, and the practice of eating raw cane predated the sugar industry itself. The cane fields have contracted dramatically since the 1970s, and the casual access to a fresh stalk that rural children once took for granted has become rare enough that most people under 40 have never tasted it.
Seafood gumbo with okra delivered a rich, spicy Creole experience that brought Gulf Coast flavor to African American Sunday tables in the 1970s. Shrimp, crab, and sometimes oysters simmered slowly in a dark roux with bell peppers, onions, and celery until the broth thickened to a luscious consistency. Fresh okra added a gentle earthiness and a natural thickening that tied the seafood together. Each spoonful offered layers of heat from cayenne and the comfort of long, simmering stock, a combination that satisfied crowds after church or on special family gatherings. The dish drew influence from African, French, and native traditions, honoring the deep roots of Southern cooking while celebrating regional abundance. Served over white rice and garnished with green onions, gumbo became more than a meal. It was a statement of heritage and celebration. Neighbors brought bread to mop up every drop, proof that the pot had achieved perfection. 7-Up pound cake brought a bright splash of citrus to African-American dessert tables in the 1970s, turning a simple pantry cake into a potluck legend. Bakers creamed butter and sugar until light, then folded in eggs, flour, and a generous pour of lemon-lime soda that gave the batter an airy lift and a gentle sparkle. As it baked in a heavy bundt pan, the kitchen filled with a sunny scent that promised slices dense yet delicate, with a subtle fizz that only a sweet soda could provide. A drizzle of simple lemon glaze or a dusting of powdered sugar finished it off, but many families served it plain to showcase its golden crumb. At church suppers and neighborhood gatherings, this cake always drew a crowd, admired for its cheerful flavor and the clever use of a common drink. The 7-Up pound cake was more than a dessert. It was a conversation starter and a symbol of creativity, proving that a splash of soda could turn an everyday recipe into a sweet memory worth sharing.
Fried salt pork and gravy was the breakfast that made something substantial from the cheapest cuts the butcher offered. Salt pork, preserved in brine and packed with fat, could be sliced thin and fried until the edges crisped and the fat rendered into the pan. That rendered fat became the base for gravy, thickened with flour and stretched with water or milk. Poured over biscuits, the gravy turned a few slices of pork into a meal that fed a whole table. The meat was chewy and intensely salty, a flavor children learned to tolerate because there wasn't anything else. This breakfast represented poverty's reality where fresh bacon was too expensive. The gravy smoothed the salt and made everything feel richer. Salt pork gravy was poor food that refused to apologize.
Stuffed celery with cream cheese and pimento created colorful boats that children picked up by their crunchy handles, the creamy filling contrasting perfectly with the crisp, fresh vegetable that provided texture amidst holiday indulgence. Mothers would wash and trim celery stalks, cutting them into 3-inch lengths before drying them thoroughly and arranging them on serving platters like little canoes. The filling was made by beating cream cheese until fluffy, then folding in diced pimentos, mayonnaise, and seasonings like garlic powder, onion powder, and black pepper. The cream cheese mixture was spread generously into each celery groove, mounded slightly and sometimes garnished with paprika, chopped olives, or crispy bacon. In Black households during the 1970s, stuffed celery represented an attempt to include something fresh among heavier holiday offerings. Children loved them because the cream cheese provided richness while celery added refreshing crunch.
Stewed tomatoes and okra carried a lineage stretching back to West Africa, where okra, brought to the Americas inside the hulls of slave ships, had thickened soups and stews for centuries. In Black kitchens of the 1970s, it cost pennies and fed the spirit like a feast. Fresh okra was sliced into rounds and fried first in a hot skillet until the slime cooked off and the edges crisped. That step separated the cooks who knew from the ones who did not. Canned tomatoes went in next, crushed with a wooden spoon, along with onion, garlic, salt, pepper, and a bay leaf. The pot simmered until the okra was tender and the tomatoes had thickened into a sauce that was tangy, savory, and rich. Served over rice, it was a full meal. Served alongside fried fish, it was a celebration. The women who grew that okra in their backyard plots knew exactly which pods to pick, no longer than a finger because anything bigger turned woody. That knowledge came from watching, not reading. Smoked turkey, neck stew became a healthier alternative to pork-based dishes while still delivering the deep, smoky flavor that Black families loved. Turkey necks were cheaper than most cuts and provided rich, dark meat that held up beautifully through hours of simmering. The smoking process had already infused them with flavor, so the stew needed little seasoning beyond onions, garlic, and bay leaves. Collard greens or cabbage were often added, cooking down in that smoky broth until silky and tender. Potatoes stretched the meal while absorbing all that savory liquid. This stew was considered lighter than its pork counterparts, but equally satisfying, perfect for families trying to eat better without abandoning comfort food. The broth was treasured almost as much as the meat, ladled over rice or sopped up with cornbread. Number 7, Benny wafers. Thin, brittle, the color of a brown paper sack, sweet from cane sugar and earthy from a heavy dose of toasted sesame seeds. Benny was the West African word for sesame, brought across the Atlantic on slave ships in the late 17th century and planted in Charleston soil where it survived for 300 years. A baker in Charleston rolled the dough out paper thin in 1962, cut it into rounds with a juice glass, baked them in a slow oven for 15 minutes, and stored them in a tin under the kitchen counter. The wafer cracked the moment your teeth touched it, and the sesame stuck to your tongue for a minute after. A pinch of sea salt at the end made the sweet taste twice as sweet. The wafer was the only American snack that traced its lineage in an unbroken line from a West African village to a Charleston pantry. 5 women in 5 kitchens had baked the same recipe across as many lifetimes. She never called it a recipe. Soft white bread, a thick spread of butter, and a generous shake of sugar pressed into the surface so it wouldn't fall off. That first bite was pure sweetness cut by the salt in the butter, the bread compressing under your teeth into something almost like cake. Across the 1950s and 60s, this was what mothers made when kids came in starving and dinner was still an hour away. No cooking, no planning, nothing that wasn't already on the counter. Some mothers sprinkled lightly, others buried the bread under a snowdrift of crystals that crunched with each bite. It was never served at gatherings, never mentioned proudly, but ask any black adult from that era and watch their face change. The memory isn't about the food, it's about hands moving fast between the counter and the table, making sure you had something sweet before the world asked anything else of you. Number 23, yellow rice with peas. On the border blocks where Bed-Stuy met East New York, the Puerto Rican families lived 3 doors down from the black families. Somebody always brought arroz con gandules. The rice was the color of a school bus, like a crayon nobody had used yet. Achiote oil in a jar on the shelf. Pigeon peas from a can with the label your mother could not read. A piece of pork shoulder cubed and seared in the bottom of the pot before the rice went in. The whole thing came down in a Reynolds tray. The auntie who carried it had a towel folded under one corner because the bottom was hot. Black kids ate it next to the curry goat. Puerto Rican kids ate it next to the collards. Nobody asked whose food was whose. By the late 1980s, the families were spread across 3 boroughs, and the trays did not meet on the same block again. Number 21, tea cakes. Do not confuse these with cookies. A tea cake was something different entirely. It was softer than a sugar cookie, thicker than a biscuit, and barely sweet enough to qualify as a dessert. A woman in Selma, Alabama, rolled her dough on a floured board with a rolling pin that had belonged to her mother, cut rounds with the rim of a drinking glass, and baked them until the bottoms were just barely golden. Her recipe was flour, butter, sugar, eggs, buttermilk, vanilla, and a scrape of nutmeg. That was it. Tea cakes carry a history that reaches back more than 200 years. Plantation cooks created them as a specialty for the enslavers who hosted afternoon gatherings, and those cooks would hide extras to slip to their own families at personal risk. During the Great Migration, the tradition traveled north in suitcases in memory. Almost every family with Southern roots had someone who made the best tea cakes. That tradition is now in danger of disappearing because the women who carried it are gone, and the recipe was rarely written down.
Spiced pecan pralines once lined church fundraising tables and family picnic baskets with their glossy sweetness and gentle crunch. Whole pecans were toasted until fragrant, then coated in a bubbling mixture of brown sugar, butter, and warm spices like cinnamon and clove. The candy cooled into soft clusters that broke apart with a satisfying snap, each bite a perfect balance of nutty richness and spiced caramel. Volunteers wrapped the pralines in wax paper or tucked them into small paper bags, selling them to raise money for community projects or simply to share a taste of love. Children waited eagerly for the last bits left to harden on the pan, scraping every sticky corner. Their aroma filled kitchens long after the candy was gone, a scent of celebration and togetherness. Today, store-bought sweets rarely capture that handmade charm, but the memory of spiced pecan pralines still carries the warmth of fellowship and the pride of a well-kept family recipe. Collard greens with smoked turkey necks gave a lighter twist to the beloved classic of greens and pork, a shift many African-American cooks embraced in the 1970s. Collards simmered slowly with smoked turkey necks released a savory depth without the heavier fat of ham hocks. The turkey enriched the pot liquor with a gentle smokiness that clung to each tender leaf, while onions, garlic, and a splash of vinegar brought brightness to balance the earthiness of the greens. Families ladled the broth into mugs and called it liquid gold, sipping it alongside slices of cornbread. This version reflected changing tastes and health concerns of the era while preserving tradition and flavor. Served at Sunday dinners or weekday suppers, it carried the memory of gatherings where conversation stretched as long as the cooking time. Today, its aroma still calls to mind those kitchens where new habits met old roots in perfect harmony. Red velvet cake with cream cheese frosting brought dramatic color and smooth tang to every celebration during the 1970s. The batter, tinted with just enough cocoa and a splash of red food coloring, baked into striking crimson layers that contrasted beautifully with the snowy frosting. Cream cheese whipped with butter and powdered sugar provided a silky finish that balanced the cake's subtle chocolate flavor with gentle tang. Each slice looked like a piece of art on a plate, making it a favorite for church anniversaries, wedding receptions, and holiday feasts. The recipe's origins carried whispers of both Southern tradition and a growing national fascination with bold presentation. Serving red velvet cake was a statement of style and hospitality, a way to show guests that a little extra effort could create something unforgettable. Families treasured the excitement it brought to the dessert table, proving that a dash of color and a touch of cream cheese could transform a simple cake into an icon of joy and celebration.
Sardines and crackers was breakfast that came from tins when there was no time or money for anything else. The small silver fish, packed in oil or mustard sauce, were cheap and shelf-stable, sitting in pantries for weeks. Mothers would pop open the can and serve sardines on saltine crackers, sometimes mashing them with a fork and adding hot sauce. Children ate them with fingers, the salty fish and crunchy crackers, making a meal surprisingly filling and rich with protein. It wasn't what anyone would choose if choices were abundant, but it was what poor families could afford. The smell was strong and unmistakable, filling kitchens with the scent of poverty and the sea. But sardines provided nutrients children needed. This was poor people's food that kept families fed when nothing else was available.
Fried okra rounds served with ranch dressing were crispy, crunchy appetizers that introduced children to vegetables in ways that made them forget they were eating something healthy, the golden coating making every bite feel like a treat. Mothers would slice fresh okra into thick rounds, coating them first in buttermilk that helped breading adhere, then dredging them in seasoned cornmeal mixed with flour, salt, pepper, and garlic powder. The okra rounds were dropped into hot oil where they bubbled and crisped, the cornmeal coating turning golden brown while the okra inside stayed tender. Once drained on paper towels and sprinkled with extra salt while still hot, the okra was piled into serving bowls and placed near small dishes of ranch dressing that children dunked them into with enthusiasm. In Black households during the 1970s, Fried okra represented Southern tradition meeting holiday hospitality. Children loved fried okra because it felt like eating fried chicken in vegetable form.
Long before that iron cooled, the jars were lining the counter. Mason jars of chow chow, the pickled relish that sat on every table and topped everything from beans to fish. Making it was a late summer project. Green tomatoes that would not ripen before frost, the last cabbage heads, bell peppers going soft, all chopped fine, salted overnight, drained, and packed into jars with hot vinegar, sugar, mustard seed, celery seed, and turmeric that turned the batch gold. In Black households across the Carolinas and Virginia, chow chow was as essential as salt. Some families made it sweet, others loaded it with cayenne until a spoonful burned your eyes. The recipe was the grandmother's, guarded not on paper, but in proportions only she could measure by sight. When the last jar was sealed, she lined them up and counted. If the count was right, the supply lasted until next summer. Too few, and the family felt it by February. Those jars held the whole garden and the woman who put them there. Ham hock and bean stew was a wintertime miracle that transformed dried beans and smoked pork into a meal substantial enough to fuel a family through freezing temperatures. The ham hocks were simmered for hours, their smoky essence infusing the cooking liquid while collagen broke down into silky richness. Navy beans or Great Northerns were added, absorbing every bit of porky flavor as they softened into creamy tenderness. Onions, garlic, and bay leaves rounded out the pot. This stew was Monday food in many households, made when the weekend ham bone still had meat clinging to it. The beans provided protein that rivaled expensive cuts, and the broth was considered medicine for cold and flu season. Families stretched this stew across several days, knowing each reheating only deepened the flavors. Number 24, parched peanuts in a brown paper sack. Your grandmother bought a pound of raw peanuts from the black-owned grocer on the corner, dumped them on a sheet pan, and roasted them dry in a 350-degree oven until the shells turned brittle and the kitchen smelled like a circus tent. She poured them into a brown paper sack folded twice at the top. The sack went in your school satchel with a thumbprint of butter on the side from the biscuit she also packed. Children cracked the shells with their teeth and spit the husks into a tin pail under the desk. A pound of raw peanuts cost 20 cents in 1957 and lasted a child a school week. The skins came off black and dry. The salt your grandmother shook on at the end was the only seasoning. That was enough. Modern grocery stores sell the same peanut, roasted in a factory, in a foil bag for 9 times the money. Parched. Peanuts required nothing but raw peanuts, a cast iron skillet, and patience, which is why every grandmother made them differently. Some roasted them in the shell, shaking the pan every few minutes until the shells darkened and the kitchen filled with a warm, earthy scent that clung to the curtains. Others shelled them first, stirring the raw nuts dry with a pinch of salt until they turned golden and the oil released. The technique traces to West Africa, where groundnuts were roasted over open fire long before reaching the American South through the slave trade. By the 1950s, parched peanuts were common in Black households across Georgia, Alabama, and the Carolinas, where peanut farming shaped local economies for generations. George Washington, Carver's work at Tuskegee had elevated the peanut from livestock feed to kitchen staple decades earlier. You ate them warm, handful by handful, and the ones at the bottom of the bowl, the most roasted, the darkest, those were always the best. Number 19, sauce on saltines, the deepest dish on this list. What most people miss about sauce is that it was never a snack. It was a passport. Sauce is hog head, meat, simmered for hours with vinegar, hot peppers, and bay leaves, then poured into a loaf pan and chilled until it set into a trembling brick of pork and jelly. It came up from Mississippi in the suitcases of women who left Greenwood and Yazoo City on the Illinois Central in the 1940s and 1950s. They arrived in the Black Belt of Chicago. By 1976, it was a block party plate in Lawndale and on the South Side, served by elders to other elders on a corner table where the children were not invited. Your great-grandmother brought it down on a saltine sleeve and a paring knife. The slice was thin, the cracker held it, the way a biscuit holds gravy. A pinch of hot sauce went on top from a bottle that had ridden up from Greenville in a handbag in 1953. Souse was a memory dish. It tasted like a back porch in a town these elders had left at 15. They named the cousins who had taught them the recipe. They named the towns, town after town, generation after generation. The naming was the point. The eating was the proof. By 1985, most of the elders were gone, and Glorious Malone's in Milwaukee was one of the only commercial souse makers left in the upper Midwest. The brick in the loaf pan was the closing argument of the Great Migration generation. It set, it sliced, and it disappeared. Number 20, fried hand pies. These were half-moon pastries filled with whatever fruit was in season, sealed with a fork, and fried in a skillet of hot oil until the crust blistered golden. A woman in Natchez, Mississippi, made hers with dried peaches she had put up the summer before. She soaked the peaches overnight, cooked them down with sugar and cinnamon, and spooned the filling onto circles of dough she rolled thin as a dime. In her kitchen in 1961, those pies cost nothing but time and a cup of lard. Some women used apples, others used blackberries or sweet potato filling. The pies were portable, which made them perfect for field workers, church picnics, and children who needed something to hold them between meals. You could wrap one in a napkin and carry it in your pocket. That was the whole point. By the time frozen turnovers showed up in grocery stores in the 1970s, the handmade version started to vanish. The convenience was cheaper, but it was not the same.
Hot water. Cornbread fritters were the quick answer to hunger when a hearty snack was needed before supper or after school. Cooks stirred boiling water into seasoned cornmeal, forming a thick dough that could be shaped into small patties with a spoon. Dropped into a skillet of hot bacon drippings, the fritters sizzled and browned within minutes, filling the room with a toasty aroma that made waiting difficult. The crust formed a crisp shell while the inside stayed tender and warm. Children often burned their fingers snatching them from the pan before they cooled, eager to taste the smoky corn flavor. These fritters paired perfectly with a drizzle of cane syrup or a slice of fresh tomato when gardens were plentiful. They proved that simple ingredients and a hot stove could create pure comfort faster than any fancy recipe. Today, the memory of that first crunchy bite still lives wherever people remember the sound of cornmeal meeting hot iron.
Pimento cheese got called the pate of the South by food writers who discovered it late, but in black households across North Carolina and Virginia, it had been the thing you put on crackers on a Friday afternoon since at least the 1930s. Homemade pimento cheese was nothing like the tub from the grocery store. It started with sharp cheddar, grated by hand, not pre-shredded, because pre-shredded cheese had a coating that kept it from binding right. The pimentos were the jarred kind, drained and chopped fine. Mayonnaise, Dukes if you were in the Carolinas and the brand mattered, held it together along with a hit of cayenne and sometimes a small amount of cream cheese for body. The ratio was a matter of deep personal conviction, and households did not agree on it. Served on saltine crackers, it was an afternoon snack, a party spread, a thing you made when company was coming and you needed something fast and real. The grocery store version replaced the homemade one, not because it tasted better, it didn't, but because it was already there when you opened the refrigerator.
Okra and tomato stew offered a garden-fresh side that captured the essence of summer in African-American kitchens of the 1970s. Sliced okra mingled with ripe tomatoes, onions, and bell peppers in a pot where a gentle simmer softened the vegetables into a vibrant, flavorful medley. A pinch of garlic and a splash of vinegar added brightness, while a bit of smoked meat or a drizzle of olive oil deepened the taste. Served alongside fried chicken or spooned over rice, it brought color and warmth to everyday meals. Families loved it because it turned backyard harvests into something hearty and wholesome, and neighbors often exchanged baskets of fresh produce to keep pots full. The smell of simmering tomatoes and okra drifting from open windows signaled hospitality and care. Today, this simple stew still whispers of long afternoons, shared gardens, and the pleasure of cooking with what the season provides. Sock-it to me cake arrived at every celebration with a name that made people smile and a swirl of cinnamon sugar that made them swoon. The batter, rich with butter and sour cream, was poured into a bundt pan with a hidden ribbon of brown sugar, pecans, and cinnamon tucked through the center. While it baked, the filling melted into a fragrant vein, leaving the kitchen warm with the aroma of roasted nuts and spice. A quick glaze of powdered sugar and vanilla cooled into a delicate crust, creating a cake that looked as inviting as it tasted. Families loved serving thick slices during Sunday coffee hours or after big dinners when laughter filled the room. The playful title, borrowed from a popular television catchphrase, gave the dessert a dash of 1970s flair, making it feel modern yet familiar. Sock-it to me cake was the perfect blend of showmanship and comfort, capturing the decades' love of bundt pans and crowd-pleasing sweets that never failed to delight everyone at the table.
Grits with red-eye gravy was breakfast for families who stretched country ham until every bit of flavor was extracted. After frying thin slices of salty ham, mothers would deglaze the pan with black coffee, creating thin gravy that was dark with a reddish tint. That gravy was poured over hot grits, turning plain corn into something deeply savory. The coffee added bitterness that cut through the salt and fat, creating flavors that woke you up as well as any morning coffee could. Children learned to eat it because that's what was served, though many came to crave its strange, compelling taste. Red-eye gravy was Southern tradition born from necessity. The grits underneath soaked up everything, becoming rich with each spoonful. This was proof that poverty could produce complex flavors.
Miniature cornbread muffins with honey butter were golden gems that children popped into their mouths whole, the crumbly cornbread texture melting while sweet honey butter added richness. Mothers would prepare cornbread batter using stone-ground cornmeal, flour, eggs, buttermilk, and just enough sugar to balance the corn's natural earthiness, then spoon it into mini muffin tins that baked quickly. The muffins emerged from ovens with crispy, slightly caramelized tops and tender, crumbly interiors that begged to be broken open and slathered with butter. Honey butter was made by whipping softened butter with honey until fluffy and smooth, creating a spread that melted instantly when slathered on hot muffins. In the 1970s, Black households, these miniature cornbread muffins represented Southern hospitality in bite-sized form. Children loved them because they were individually portioned, making them feel like special treats rather than ordinary bread, and the sweet honey butter made every bite feel indulgent and special.
Smothered chicken with onion gravy turned the cheapest parts of the bird into something that made grown men go quiet at the table. In the 1970s, whole chickens cost less than $1 a pound, and your mother stretched one across Sunday dinner and Monday lunch. She seasoned thighs and legs with salt, pepper, garlic powder, and paprika, dredged them in flour, and browned them in cast iron until the crust went deep gold. The chicken came out. Thick sliced onions went in, sizzling in the drippings until they collapsed into something sweet. Flour went back into the fat, stirred fast, then broth hit the pan in a rush of steam that fogged the windows. The chicken returned, the lid came down, and the whole thing simmered an hour until the meat slid off the bone. Spooned over white rice, the gravy soaked through every grain. You knew it was done when the smell changed from sharp to deep and round. Only the person at the stove could read that moment. Oxtail stew was once the crown jewel of winter cooking in black households, simmered low and slow until the meat fell away from the bone in tender ribbons. The oxtails were seared in a heavy pot until caramelized, then braised with onions, garlic, tomatoes, and root vegetables. Thyme, bay leaves, and allspice gave the broth a depth that filled the kitchen with warmth long before dinner was served. The marrow melted into the liquid, creating richness that no store-bought broth could match. Families gathered around for this dish on Sunday evenings, knowing one pot could feed everyone with enough left for Monday. The stew represented transformation, turning what butchers once discarded into something magnificent. Children learned early that the best flavor lived in the bones. Number 18, butter rolls. Soft biscuit dough rolled out thin, brushed with butter, dusted heavy with cane sugar and a little cinnamon, rolled into a log, sliced into rounds, baked in a pan with a splash of milk poured over the top before they hit the oven. A grandmother in Atlanta pulled them out on a Saturday afternoon, and the kitchen smelled like a bakery. You stood at the counter waiting for the pan to cool enough that you could pick one up without burning your fingers. The roll was sticky on the bottom from the milk and sugar, soft in the middle, crisp on the top edge. A pan of 12 butter rolls cost about 30 cents to make in 1956 and disappeared in a single afternoon. She didn't write the recipe down because the dough was the same biscuit dough she made every morning. Modern grocery store cinnamon rolls cost $5 for 6 and taste like cardboard. Her pan in 1956 was the original. Before lunch, money was a guarantee. Syrup sandwiches filled the gap between hunger and the next real meal. 2 slices of white bread, a heavy pour of Cairo syrup or dark cane syrup, pressed together and wrapped in wax paper for school. The bread went soft and sticky within minutes, part of the appeal for little hands that liked pulling it apart in sweet, doughy strings. In the 1950s, a bottle of Cairo cost less than 20 cents and stretched across a week of snacks for 3 or 4 kids. Dark syrup carried a caramel note with a faint bitterness that balanced the sweetness. Light was milder, preferred by the younger ones. No one bragged about eating syrup sandwiches. It was the kind of snack made quietly on afternoons when the icebox held nothing else. But decades later, grown men and women speak of it with something close to reverence because that sandwich meant somebody made sure you didn't go without. Number 22, smothered chicken backs in a foil hotel pan. Chicken backs were the part the butcher could not sell on Friday. They went home in a brown bag for 30 cents a pound. Saturday morning, they got dredged in flour, browned in lard, smothered in onion gravy. Your grandmother layered them into a foil tray with the gravy poured over. The tray sat on the radio in the living room while she got dressed. Down on the curb, the tray went on a folding table next to the rice. A serving spoon stood up in the gravy, like a steak in soft ground. A child carrying a paper plate held it with 2 hands because the gravy was still hot. The backs were almost all bone. The reward was the gravy on the rice. The thing is, the backs were never the point. The gravy was the point. By 1985, the butcher who sold the backs had closed. Number 25, crackling bread. This was the snack that told you a hog had been killed recently and nothing was going to waste. A woman in Utah, Alabama, made hers by stirring bits of fried pork skin and rendered fat directly into her cornmeal batter. She added a pinch of salt, a splash of buttermilk, and poured it all into a cast iron skillet that had not been washed with soap since 1941. The cracklings gave the bread a salty crunch that regular cornbread could not touch. In the 1960s, a slab of crackling bread cost nothing extra because the cracklings came from the same hog that gave you your chops, your lard, and your fat back. It was arithmetic. Every part of that animal had a purpose, and wasting any of it was something your grandmother would not allow. By the 1990s, most families had stopped butchering their own hogs. The cracklings you could buy in a bag at the gas station were not the same. The bread disappeared with the butchering.
Sweet potato tea cakes were once the pride of community bake sales and Sunday socials, a simple cookie that carried the fragrance of home in every bite. Mashed sweet potato gave the dough a gentle orange hue and natural sweetness, while molasses and warm spices like cinnamon and nutmeg filled kitchens with an autumn scent no matter the season. Grandmothers stirred the batter with wooden spoons worn smooth from years of use, passing quiet wisdom to the children who helped scoop each round onto greased pans. The cakes baked into soft, slightly chewy circles that could be eaten plain or brushed with a thin sugar glaze if the family had a little extra. Churchgoers wrapped them in brown paper to sell for mission fundraisers, and travelers carried a few in coat pockets for long train rides when cafe prices were too high. Today, their memory lingers mostly in handwritten recipe cards tucked inside family Bibles. Tasting one now would be like opening a window to the warmth of a kitchen filled with laughter, hymn humming, and the sweet comfort of community spirit.
Cracklings were never a planned snack. They were a consequence of doing something else. Rendering lard was a fall and winter task in Black households across the rural South, a way of preserving hog fat that went back long before the 19th century. The fat was cut into small cubes and cooked low and slow in a cast iron pot until the moisture cooked out and the fat rendered clear. What remained after the liquid fat was poured off was a small, dense, crispy chunk of skin and fat that had concentrated everything into something intensely savory. In West African cooking traditions, fried pork rinds had deep roots. Enslaved Africans brought those culinary instincts to the American South, and the crackling became embedded in Black foodways from Virginia down to Louisiana. Salted immediately and eaten still warm from the pot, cracklings carried a richness that cooled into something different. Still good, but not the same. The rendering process has almost entirely vanished from home kitchens. Nobody keeps a pot going for hours anymore. The cracklings that came from it vanished with the practice.
Smothered turkey wings brought slow-cooked comfort to African American tables in the 1970s, turning a simple cut of poultry into a meal that filled the house with warmth and rich aroma. Turkey wings were first browned in a heavy skillet to develop a golden crust, then nestled into a bath of onions, garlic, and homemade stock. The slow braise transformed the meat into something so tender it slid from the bone with barely a touch, while the onions melted into a silky gravy that clung to every bite. Families served the wings over fluffy rice or with a wedge of cornbread, letting the gravy soak through until each mouthful tasted of deep seasoning and care. It was a dish that worked for weeknights yet felt worthy of Sunday, a reminder that patience and love create flavor no expensive ingredient can match. Though rarely made today, one taste recalls the lively kitchens of the 70s. Coconut sheet cake was the chilled showstopper of warm weather socials, a snowy white vision that cooled the hottest summer evenings. A light sponge cake baked in a large rectangular pan provided the base, while a creamy coconut frosting made with evaporated milk and sweetened shredded coconut blanketed the top like fresh snow. After chilling, the cake absorbed the frosting's rich flavor, turning each bite into a tender tropical treat. Served in generous squares at backyard picnics or family reunions, it delivered sweetness without heaviness, perfect after barbecue or spicy foods. Guests admired the way the coconut caught the light, sparkling like tiny crystals as the cake was sliced. In African American households of the 1970s, coconut sheet cake became a seasonal favorite that signaled celebration and hospitality. Its simplicity and ability to feed a crowd made it a practical choice, while its striking appearance ensured it was remembered long after the last square disappeared from the platter.
Cornmeal mush with bacon grease was the breakfast that kept Black children fed when the cupboard held almost nothing else. Mothers stirred coarse cornmeal into boiling water, cooking it slow until it thickened into dense porridge that could fill the hungriest belly. The bacon grease added precious calories and richness that plain mush couldn't provide. Families saved every drop of rendered fat in coffee cans beside the stove, knowing it would stretch meals through the week. Children ate it hot from chip bowls, sometimes with salt or a drizzle of sorghum. It wasn't fancy, but it was warm and filling. This breakfast taught children that resourcefulness meant never wasting anything, not even yesterday's cooking fat. The taste carried memories of wood stoves and mothers who made miracles from almost nothing.
Cheese straws made from sharp cheddar and cayenne pepper were crispy, addictive sticks that disappeared from serving bowls almost as quickly as they were refilled, their orange-gold color and spicy kick making them irresistible. Grandmothers would grate blocks of sharp cheddar by hand, mixing it with softened butter, flour, cayenne pepper, and salt until the dough came together, then pressing it through cookie presses or rolling it into long ropes before slicing. The cheese straws baked until crispy and slightly browned at the edges, filling kitchens with the sharp, tangy aroma of melting cheese mixed with subtle heat. Once cooled, they were stored in tins, maintaining crispness for days. In 1970s, Black households, cheese straws represented Southern tradition, recipes passed down through generations with each family adding their signature touch, extra cayenne, paprika, or pecans.
Plain cornbread was the daily bread. Crackling cornbread was the Sunday version. Cracklings folded into the batter, nuggets of rendered pork skin that added salt, fat, and a crunch you heard across the table. The cracklings came from hog killing day, when fat was rendered in a washpot outdoors, and the solids left behind were pressed, salted, and sealed in lard jars. A handful went into the mix: stone ground yellow cornmeal, egg, buttermilk, a pinch of soda, and enough bacon drippings to grease the skillet until it smoked. The batter hit screaming hot iron, and the bottom crust formed instantly, golden, almost caramelized. You ate it hot, split with butter, or crumbled into pot liquor. The sound of breaking a wedge was specific, a clean snap followed by a soft crumble. And if it did not make that sound, the skillet was not hot enough when the batter went in. That kind of detail, only the women who baked it 3 times a week ever carried. Pinto bean and sausage stew was hearty weeknight fare that stretched a small amount of meat into a meal substantial enough to feed a crowd. The beans were soaked overnight, then simmered with sliced smoked sausage, onions, garlic, and tomatoes until everything became tender. The sausage released its fat into the broth, creating richness that permeated every bite. Some cooks added chili powder or cumin for warmth, while others kept seasoning simple. This stew was often made on Sundays and reheated throughout the week, each serving tasting better than the last. The beans provided protein and fiber, while sausage satisfied cravings for meat without breaking the budget. Children grew up eating this stew over rice, learning that simple ingredients cooked with care could rival anything. Tomato rice carried the bright tang of canned tomatoes mixed into fluffy grains, a dish that children either loved immediately or grew to crave. Mothers would saute onions in bacon grease until soft, then add canned tomatoes and let them break down into a fragrant sauce. Rice was stirred in and cooked slowly, absorbing every drop of that tangy, sweet liquid until each grain turned a beautiful sunset orange. Some families added sugar to balance acidity, while others preferred natural sharpness that cut through heavier dishes. It was often served alongside fried fish or pork chops, but children happily ate bowls of it alone. Tomato rice was inexpensive, using pantry staples that cost pennies but delivered comfort worth far more. This dish taught children that simple ingredients created memorable meals. Cinnamon sugar toast was the first snack most black kids learned to make alone, standing on a chair to reach the counter. The bread had to be white and soft enough to hold the butter without tearing. You spread it thick all the way to the edges because bare corners were unacceptable. Then came the cinnamon and sugar from a jar that lived next to the stove, the ratio known only to whoever filled it. The toast went under the broiler, never in a toaster, and you watched through the oven door until the sugar bubbled and the edges turned dark gold. You ate it standing up, burning your fingers, licking the grit off your thumb. It cost pennies, took 3 minutes, and the smell alone could pull every kid in the house out of hiding. Nobody sells it, nobody orders it, but that smell takes you straight back to a kitchen where the oven was always warm. Number 25, half-smoked sausages on the half-barrel grill. The barrel came from a corner garage in Northwest DC. Somebody cut it lengthwise with a torch on a Tuesday. Iron legs by Friday. The half-smokes came from mangers in West Baltimore, packed in butcher paper, split lengthwise so they cooked faster. The man working the fire wore a dish towel on his shoulder, the way your uncle did. He turned each link with a long fork that used to be part of a fence. The smell carried 3 blocks. Kids lined up first because the elders said so. The bun was a slice of Wonder Bread, folded once. A half smoke off that grill in 1977 cost the host nothing and fed 40 people. By 1989, the man with the torch was gone. The garage was a check cashing storefront. The grill outlived the block. Number 17, pickled pig's feet. You either know exactly what these are or you have never seen one in your life. There is no middle ground. A woman in Mobile, Alabama, kept a gallon jar of pickled pig's feet on the counter of her kitchen from 1958 until the day she moved to a nursing home in 1991. The feet were clean, boiled until tender, then packed into jars with vinegar, salt, red pepper flakes, bay leaves, and sliced onion. They sat in that brine for weeks, and the longer they sat, the better they got. In the 1960s, you could buy fresh pig's feet at any butcher counter in the South for less than 15 cents a pound. They were one of the cheapest cuts available because most people did not want them. Black families turned that rejection into a delicacy. You ate them cold, straight from the jar, standing at the kitchen counter with a paper towel in your hand. That was enough.
Ginger molasses drop cookies carried the bold spice of ginger and the deep sweetness of molasses into lunch baskets and picnic tins across the South. The dough, thick with dark syrup and fragrant with ground ginger, cinnamon, and clove, baked into soft rounds that stayed moist for days. Families loved them because they traveled well, perfect for train rides, long church meetings, or a neighborly visit across town. Children often helped roll the dough into balls, dusting their fingers with flour while sneaking tiny tastes of the spicy batter. The cookies emerged from the oven puffed and slightly cracked, their aroma filling every corner of the house with a cozy warmth that lingered until bedtime. Wrapped in paper and tied with string, they became tokens of affection passed between friends and sweethearts. Today, packaged cookies dominate store shelves, but none capture the slow-baked heart of these homemade delights. Each bite is a gentle reminder of days when sharing a simple cookie could speak volumes about care and connection.
Salmon patties were the answer to a tight week that still needed to feel like a real meal. Canned salmon, the pink kind, not the fancy red, was the protein backbone of black kitchens from the 1940s through the 70s, affordable even when everything else had gone up. The bones went in too, mashed soft and invisible, carrying calcium nobody called calcium. They just called it not wasting anything. breadcrumbs, or crushed crackers bound the patties along with egg, diced onion, and a shake of hot sauce. Cast iron, medium heat, a thin coat of oil. The patties went in and stayed put until the bottom set into a crust the color of dark honey. Flipped once, finished, served with white rice and whatever green was in the pot. She made them on Fridays without fail for 40 years. After she stopped cooking, nobody in the family made salmon patties again. It wasn't that they couldn't, it was that the Friday didn't feel the same anymore, and nobody wanted to sit still with that.
Black-eyed pea hoppin'. John brought New Year's luck to African-American families and remained a beloved weeknight supper throughout the 1970s. Black-eyed peas were simmered with onions, celery, and smoked meat before being folded into fluffy rice, creating a dish that symbolized prosperity and tasted like comfort. A pinch of cayenne and a splash of vinegar brightened the pot, while the slow simmer filled homes with a warm, earthy aroma. Families believed eating it on the first day of the year brought fortune, but many enjoyed it all winter for its hearty flavor and thrift. Served with collard greens and cornbread, it formed a complete meal that satisfied both tradition and appetite. Children learned to stir the peas and listen for the gentle bubbling that meant dinner was nearly ready. Today, each spoonful still carries the hope and history of those lively 70s kitchens. Caramel layer cake stood tall and proud at birthdays, church anniversaries, and family reunions, its rich frosting gleaming like bronze. Bakers stacked 3 or 4 buttery yellow cake layers, each tender and moist, then spread warm, homemade caramel icing between them, letting it drip luxuriously down the sides. The icing required patience, cooked slowly with sugar, cream, and a little butter until it reached the perfect stage of deep amber sweetness. As it cooled, it formed a soft yet slightly chewy shell, creating a texture contrast that guests adored. Cutting the cake revealed ribbons of caramel clinging to each slice, a sight that made even adults clap their hands like children. In African-American kitchens of the 1970s, mastering caramel icing was a badge of honor and a skill passed lovingly through generations. Caramel layer cake was a dessert of celebration and craft, showing that with time, steady stirring, and a watchful eye, simple ingredients could become a centerpiece worthy of every milestone worth remembering.
Fried fatback and eggs was breakfast that proved even the cheapest meat could anchor a morning meal. Fatback, pure pork fat, sliced from the pig's back, was what poor families bought when bacon was beyond reach. Sliced thin and fried, slow in cast iron, it rendered into crispy strips, swimming in grease while filling the kitchen with a smell that announced breakfast was serious. The eggs came next, fried in that fat until their edges lace brown, the yolk still soft. Together they made a plate that was rich, salty, and filling enough to carry anyone through until lunch. Fatback had no meat, just pure fat providing calories and flavor. It was what the poor could afford, the part wealthier families didn't want. This breakfast was survival food that refused to pretend otherwise.
Fried chicken wings with hot sauce and butter created sticky, finger-licking appetizers that had children lined up before dinner was announced, their crispy exteriors giving way to tender meat falling off the bone. Families prepared massive batches on Thanksgiving morning, seasoning them with salt, pepper, garlic powder, and paprika, before dredging in flour and dropping into cast-iron skillets filled with bubbling hot oil. The wings fried until golden brown and crackling crisp, filling kitchens with aromas that drew everyone from every corner. Once drained and still hot, wings were tossed in melted butter and hot sauce, the heat always bold and spicy. In the 1970s, Black households, these wings represented abundance, showing guests everyone was welcome to eat their fill. Children loved them because they were handheld, required no utensils, and delivered maximum flavor with every bite.
She kept them in a bag in the freezer, yellow and curled. And when you were young, they frightened you. But your grandmother saw something in chicken feet the grocery store did not. Collagen, gelatin, a broth so rich it set like jelly when it cooled. The feet were scrubbed, outer skin peeled after a blanch, nails clipped with kitchen shears, into the pot with onion, celery, garlic, and bay leaves. Hours later, the liquor had turned golden and thick, the feet broken down until tiny bones pulled from tender meat. In the Caribbean and across West Africa, chicken foot soup was healing food, given to the sick and the newly delivered mother. Black families in the South carried that belief into the 1970s. When supermarkets replaced corner butcher shops, the stew disappeared from most kitchens. The women who made it swore the broth could fix anything. They are gone now. Nobody has found a replacement. Butterbean stew was creamy comfort in a bowl, made from large lima beans that broke down during cooking into something almost like a thick sauce. The beans were simmered with smoked ham hocks or bacon, their natural starch thickening the broth while pork added depth and richness. Onions and garlic were essential, as were bay leaves that perfumed the entire pot. Some families added tomatoes for color, while others preferred the pure, creamy simplicity of beans and pork. This stew was filling enough to serve as a complete meal, especially paired with cornbread that soaked up every drop of that silky broth. Children often requested seconds, not realizing how little the meal cost to prepare. Butterbean stew represented Southern cooking magic, transforming humble dried beans into something that tasted far richer. Number 1, the chicken neck skin. Chew. The skin had been pulled off the neck of a Sunday stew bird at a kitchen in Tuskegee in 1957, salted heavy, laid on a tin sheet, and left in the August sun on the back porch for a day and a night. By the next afternoon, the skin was hard the way a piece of beef jerky is hard, dry, and salty, and a little sweet from the sugar rubbed in with the salt. The cook stored the strips in a paper sack on the kitchen counter. A child grabbed a strip on the way out the door to school, the way a modern child grabs a granola bar. The salt cured the meat and pulled the water out, the way every working culture cured every cut of every animal for 10,000 years before refrigeration. Nothing about this snack sounded fake to the woman who made it. It was a working answer to a chicken that had to feed 7 people on a Tuesday. But not every snack came from the stove. Some came from standing around the kitchen table with greased hands. Popcorn balls held together with dark molasses were a project that turned an ordinary evening into something worth keeping. Corn was popped on the stove in a heavy pot, shaken hard until it slowed, dumped into the biggest bowl in the house. Molasses, often sorghum-based in the deep South, where families pressed their own from tall cane stalks, melted with butter until it coated a spoon without sliding off. You had to work fast once it hit the popcorn, stirring and shaping balls with oiled hands before the syrup cooled and hardened. Kids stood around waiting for their turn, fingers sticky and shining. These showed up at Halloween when store-bought candy was beyond the budget, at church harvest festivals, and on cold nights when the house needed something sweet that cost almost nothing. The molasses gave them a smoky sweetness white sugar couldn't match. But what stayed in memory wasn't the taste. It was standing at that table together, laughing, hands greased and moving. Number 17, pound cake from Aunt Jemima or Sarah Lee. Not every cake on the block was made from scratch. Some came in a yellow box from the bottom shelf of the corner store, like a small confession. A working mother got home at 6 on Friday, slid the foil pan into the oven, came out to the table with the smell of vanilla in the kitchen, and called it her own. The act of pulling it from the oven was the act of caring. Sarah Lee pound cake on a paper plate with a spoon of canned peaches on top from a Del Monte tin was a curb dessert in 1974 that nobody apologized for. The frozen food aisle was a friend to a mother working 2 shifts. The thing is, the cake was never about the cake. It was about who slid it in the oven for you. By 1990, the freezer aisle had grown bigger. the homemade pound cake had moved into a once-a-year holiday slot, and the Saturday curb cake was a sheet from the Pathmark Bakery, plastic domed with no story attached. Number 16, peanut patties. These were flat, round discs of pink candy studded with roasted peanuts, and in the 1960s, you could find them in every gas station, general store, and candy counter across the Black South. A woman in Tyler, Texas, made hers from scratch using sugar, corn syrup, peanuts, butter, and a few drops of red food coloring that turned the whole batch the color of a sunset. She poured the hot candy onto wax paper in circles the size of her palm and let them harden in the evening air. Tyler Candy Company began producing peanut patties commercially around this same time and has been operating in the same facility for more than 70 years. But the homemade version, the one your aunt made on the stove and wrapped in cellophane for church fundraisers, that version is the one that is gone. The store-bought patties survive, the kitchen version does not.
Sweet potato biscuit sandwiches were small but mighty, combining tender biscuits with the natural sweetness of a beloved root vegetable. Mashed sweet potatoes colored the dough a gentle orange and added moistness that kept each biscuit soft even after a day. Baked in cast iron pans, they emerged golden and fragrant, ready to be split and filled with cane syrup, apple butter, or even a slice of country ham when available. Families served them at holiday breakfasts and late-night suppers alike, delighting in their versatility and comforting taste. Children often snuck extra sandwiches while elders shared stories around the table, the scent of warm sweet potato filling the room. These little treats symbolized celebration without extravagance, proof that a simple garden crop could create a moment of quiet luxury. Though few kitchens prepare them today, the memory of that first bite, soft and sweet against a drizzle of syrup, lingers like a treasured song passed from one generation to the next.
The jar sat on the counter for weeks, and you knew what was in it before you got close enough to read anything. Pickled eggs were a staple of Black household pantries and country stores across the South. Hard-boiled eggs put up in vinegar brine, sometimes plain, sometimes with beet juice that turned the whites deep purple, sometimes spiced with hot peppers and garlic that made the contents run hot. The longer they sat, the deeper the brine penetrated until a 3-week egg tasted almost entirely of the liquid it had been sitting in. At rural general stores, in Black communities from the Reconstruction era through the 1970s, a jar of pickled eggs next to the cash register was as standard as a jar of pickled pig's feet. The practice of preserving eggs in brine runs through West African food traditions and through the foodways of enslaved people who needed to extend protein through weeks when nothing fresh was available. The counter jars are gone now. The practice went with them.
Peach cobbler with biscuit topping sweetened countless church socials and family reunions across African American communities in the 1970s. Juicy peaches were tossed with sugar and warm spices, then blanketed with soft biscuit dough that baked into a golden crust. As it cooked, the filling bubbled up around the edges, creating sticky, caramelized corners that everyone fought to scoop first. Served warm with a scoop of homemade vanilla ice cream or a pour of cream, it turned ordinary evenings into celebrations. Families often canned summer peaches so cobblers could be enjoyed year-round, stretching the harvest well into winter. The dessert represented both ingenuity and indulgence, proving that simple fruit and pantry staples could create something extraordinary. Its fragrance of baked fruit and buttered dough filled homes with irresistible warmth, a memory worth reviving in modern kitchens where flavor and tradition still meet. Lemon chess pie shone with bright flavor and a silky custard that made every bite feel like sunshine. A simple filling of fresh lemon juice, sugar, eggs, and butter, baked into a single crust until the top developed a delicate golden sheen and the center set to a creamy, tangy perfection. The pie cooled to a gentle wobble that invited quick slicing and generous servings. Families loved how the dessert used basic ingredients yet delivered a sophisticated citrus punch, ideal for cutting through rich dinners or heavy holiday spreads. Lemon chess pie brought a welcome spark to church luncheons, family reunions, and Sunday suppers throughout the 1970s. Its zesty aroma filled kitchens with a hint of spring even in the heart of winter, offering comfort and brightness in equal measure. This pie proved that elegance could come from everyday staples, turning lemons and sugar into a memorable finale that refreshed the spirit and left guests asking for the recipe to share and cherish.
Canned mackerel cakes were breakfast when money couldn't stretch to fresh fish or even canned salmon. The fish came packed in water or oil, mashed with whatever binder was available, usually cracker crumbs or leftover cornbread. Mothers shaped the mixture into patties and fried them until both sides turned golden and crispy. The flavor was strong and fishy, but it was protein poor families could afford when meat prices climbed too high. Children learned to eat mackerel cakes with hot sauce to mask the intensity, though many grew to love that briny taste. These cakes stretched a single can into breakfast for an entire family when served with grits. The smell announced itself through the whole house. Mackerel cakes represented making do, turning cheap canned fish into something filling and satisfying.
Pigs in blankets made with cocktail franks wrapped in crescent roll dough emerged from ovens as perfect little packages that children ate by the handful, their small size making them perfect for young appetites and hands that grabbed multiple pieces at once. Mothers would unroll refrigerated crescent dough, separating it along the perforations before cutting each triangle in half to create smaller pieces that wrapped around cocktail-sized hot dogs snugly. The wrapped franks were arranged on baking sheets with the dough seam facing down, sometimes brushed with melted butter or beaten egg for extra golden color. As they baked, the dough puffed up and turned flaky and golden, while the franks inside steamed and stayed juicy, creating combinations of textures that made every bite satisfying. In the 1970s, Black households, pigs in blankets represented quick, crowd-pleasing appetizers. Children loved them because they were perfectly sized for little hands.
Every kitchen had one, a glass, bottle, usually an old hot sauce jar or a repurposed vinegar bottle filled with tiny bird peppers, steeping in white vinegar until the liquid turned pale orange and the heat settled in deep. Pepper sauce was never bought. It was made. Your grandmother dropped fresh peppers from her garden into that bottle every summer, topped it off with vinegar, and let it sit on the table year-round beside the salt, pepper, and hot sauce. You shook it over greens, over beans, over rice, a few drops at a time because the vinegar carried more fire than it looked. Through the 70s, that bottle was a household signature. Each household sauce tasted different depending on the peppers grown, how long they steeped, and whether the cook added garlic or a pinch of sugar to round the edges. When your grandmother passed, somebody kept her cast iron, somebody kept her mixing bowls, nobody thought to save that pepper bottle. Nothing from the store has ever come close to what was inside it. Kidney bean stew was a thick, satisfying pot of comfort that required little more than dried beans, seasoning, and patience. The beans were soaked overnight, then simmered with onions, garlic, tomatoes, and whatever smoked meat the family had, often a ham bone or salt pork. The result was a rich, brick red stew that clung to rice and soaked into cornbread beautifully. Some cooks added bell peppers and celery, creating something close to simplified red beans and rice. This stew was Monday tradition in many households, made while laundry was done. Children came home from school to find it bubbling on the stove, its aroma promising warmth. The beans provided protein that stretched across several meals, and the broth was considered almost as valuable as the beans themselves. Rice and gravy was the ultimate weeknight rescue, a dish that turned leftover pan drippings into liquid gold poured over fluffy white rice. Black mothers knew nothing should be wasted after frying pork chops or chicken. So they added flour to the pan and stirred until browned. Milk or water was whisked in slowly, creating thick, savory gravy that bubbled while the rice steamed nearby. The combination was simple but satisfying, offering protein-rich flavor without requiring another piece of meat. Children loved how the gravy soaked into each grain, turning plain rice into something rich and comforting. This dish represented the resourcefulness of African American kitchens, where flavor was built from what others might discard. It was frugal cooking at its finest, proving that ingenuity mattered more than expensive ingredients. Somewhere in the Mississippi Delta, probably in the late 1960s, somebody dropped a dill pickle into a jar of Kool-Aid and invented something no cookbook would ever claim. Koolickles were made by draining half the brine from a pickle jar, pouring in a packet of Kool-Aid mixed with a cup of sugar, sealing it, and letting it sit for a week. The pickles turned electric red or deep purple, absorbing sweetness while keeping their sour crunch. Sweet, salty, and tart together, it made no sense until it hit your tongue. They were sold at corner stores and school fundraisers across the Delta, fished from jars with tongs. Cherry and tropical punch were favorites, though grape had its loyalists. A quarter bought you one, and it delivered more flavor per bite than anything else behind that counter. It was backroad brilliance, born from boredom and fearless experimentation by people who never worried about what food was supposed to be. Number 16, watermelon halved on cutting boards on the curb. A whole melon came up from a stand in Hunts Point on a Friday evening for $2, sat in a metal wash tub of ice on a stoop, and got cut open at 3 o'clock when the sun was on the east side of the building. The cutter was always the same man, 2 doors down, with a long knife he kept wrapped in a dish towel. He halved it, quartered it, sliced it into wedges that went on a paper plate. Children ate it, leaning forward over the curb so the juice did not stain their Sunday clothes. The seeds got spit into the gutter without comment. The melon was like a clock. When the rinds piled up in the gutter, you knew the afternoon was past its peak. By 1992, the cutting man had passed, the long knife was in his daughter's drawer, and the curb watermelon was a supermarket pre-cut tray with a price sticker. Number 15, persimmon pudding. If you have never eaten a ripe persimmon, you do not know what you are missing. And if you have eaten an unripe one, you know exactly why most people stop trying. A woman in rural Tennessee made her persimmon pudding by collecting wild persimmons from a tree behind her house every November after the first frost. She mashed them through a colander to remove the seeds and skin, mixed the pulp with flour, sugar, eggs, buttermilk, and a pour of melted butter, then baked it in a dish until it set like a dense, spiced custard. This was a seasonal snack that existed for about 4 weeks each year, between the first frost and the first hard freeze. You could not rush it. You could not store the fruit. You had to wait for the tree to decide it was time. That patience was built into the recipe. When families moved from the country to the city, the persimmon trees stayed behind.
Okra poppers brought a lively crunch to community fish fries and backyard gatherings where neighbors lingered late into the evening. Fresh young okra pods were rinsed, sliced, and tossed in seasoned cornmeal before a quick dip in hot oil that sealed in their garden brightness. The sizzle filled the air with a nutty scent that mixed perfectly with the aroma of frying catfish and hush puppies. Served straight from the skillet while still hot, each popper offered a tender interior wrapped in a crisp golden coat. Children reached for them faster than the adults could refill the platter, their fingers dusted with cornmeal as they darted back for more. A sprinkle of salt and a dash of pepper vinegar gave the final bite a pleasant heat. These simple snacks showed how a humble vegetable from backyard rows could turn into a party favorite. The memory of standing beside the fryer, watching those green coins dance in bubbling oil, remains a treasured scene of summer nights filled with laughter, music, and the smell of good food shared freely among friends.
Ketchup sandwiches emerged when refrigerators held nothing but condiments and hope, turning a squeeze bottle into the main course. 2 slices of bread with ketchup spread across them became lunch for children whose families had stretched every dollar past its breaking point. The tangy sweetness gave flavor where none existed, and the red spread looked almost cheerful against pale bread. Kids learned to accept these without complaint because something was better than nothing. Mothers handed them over with quiet resolve, knowing tomorrow might bring better meals. The ketchup provided vitamins and enough taste to make bread worth chewing. There was an unspoken code that no one mocked another child's lunch because everyone had eaten ketchup sandwiches at some point. These meals represented the thin line between hunger and survival.
Sweet potato pie with brown sugar crust graced countless African-American holiday tables in the 1970s, its silky filling and caramelized edges turning every slice into a memory of warmth and family pride. Mashed sweet potatoes blended with eggs, milk, and a careful mix of cinnamon and nutmeg created a custard smooth enough to melt on the tongue. The crust, brushed with brown sugar before baking, formed a caramel layer that added a gentle crunch and a hint of toffee sweetness with every bite. Grandmothers taught their children how to roast the potatoes until their skins nearly burst, coaxing out natural sugars that made the pie glow with deep orange color. Served at Thanksgiving, Christmas, and Sunday gatherings, it became a symbol of generosity and skill, a dessert that needed no fancy ingredients to impress. Even after days on the counter, a chilled slice tasted as comforting as one straight from the oven. Families guarded their recipes like treasures, each household adding subtle touches such as a splash of vanilla or a whisper of lemon zest. Today, the first whiff of baked sweet potato pie can still summon images of crowded kitchens and laughter echoing into winter nights. Buttermilk pie wrapped simple pantry ingredients into a velvety custard that tasted far richer than its modest origins. Eggs, sugar, butter, and tangy buttermilk whisked together into a smooth filling that baked in a single crust until the surface browned lightly and the center set to a creamy consistency. The slight tang of the buttermilk balanced the sweetness, making each bite both comforting and intriguing. African-American families in the 1970s valued the recipe for its thrift and reliability, knowing that even in lean times, a luxurious dessert was within reach. Served warm or chilled, plain or with a scattering of fresh berries, buttermilk pie delighted guests without demanding complicated techniques or expensive ingredients. Its enduring charm lay in the way it brought people together around something humble yet special. Each slice carried the quiet satisfaction of resourcefulness and tradition, a reminder that the heart of hospitality often rests in the simplest, most lovingly prepared dishes shared at the end of a long meal.
Fried cornmeal mush was yesterday's breakfast, reborn into something new the next morning. Leftover mush was poured into a loaf pan and refrigerated until firm enough to slice. Those thick slabs were fried in bacon grease until the outside turned crispy and golden while the inside stayed soft and creamy. Drizzled with syrup or molasses, it became breakfast that felt almost like a treat despite costing nearly nothing. The crispy exterior gave way to smooth, warm mush that melted on the tongue. This was 2 meals from 1 pot of cornmeal, stretching resources in ways only poor families truly understood. Children often preferred the fried version to the original, asking for extra slices. The transformation showed how creativity could make poverty food exciting. Fried mush was proof that leftovers could become something worth anticipating.
Cocktail meatballs simmered in grape jelly and chili sauce created sweet, savory bites that children couldn't resist, the glossy sauce coating each meatball like candy while delivering unexpected flavors. Mothers would brown frozen meatballs in skillets before transferring them to slow cookers or pots where they simmered in a mixture of grape jelly and bottled chili sauce that melted together into a thick, shiny glaze. The combination sounded strange but tasted magical, the grape jelly's sweetness balancing the chili sauce's tang and creating a flavor profile that kept people reaching for more. As the meatballs simmered, they absorbed the sauce and became tender, the exterior developing a sticky coating that made them perfect for spearing with toothpicks. In Black households during the 1970s, these cocktail meatballs represented easy elegance, a recipe that seemed fancy but required minimal effort. Children loved them because they were bite-sized, required no cutting, and tasted like a sweet, savory treat.
Time equals 1 second / greater than the smell of pork chops. Frying on a Saturday could pull you in from 3 houses down. Thin bone-in chops seasoned with salt, pepper, and garlic powder, dredged in flour, fried in Crisco until the crust turned dark gold and the edges curled crisp. The sandwich was simple. 1 chop laid flat on soft white bread, hit with hot sauce or mustard, topped with another slice, wrapped tight in wax paper. You ate it with your hands, the bread soaking up grease until it went translucent but never fell apart. Back then, fried pork chop sandwiches traveled to work in lunch pails, on road trips in paper bags, to the park where the grill was for show, but the real food came from the kitchen. Your father ate them cold at midnight, standing at the counter. Your mother made a dozen at a time. The chops cost less than $1 for a whole pack. The bread cost $0.25. The meal held a family together on nothing, and it tasted like everything. Bean sandwiches emerged from pots of pinto or navy beans that had simmered all day, the leftovers mashed and spread across bread the next afternoon. Mothers scooped soft beans onto slices of white bread, sometimes adding onion or hot sauce for flavor. The beans provided protein and fiber and filling children's bellies with nutrients that sustained them through school. This was honest and nourishing food, using every bit of the previous night's dinner. The texture was thick and earthy, the taste familiar to children raised on beans as a staple. In Black households where dried beans cost almost nothing, this sandwich made practical sense. Kids ate them, understanding that leftovers were not waste, but opportunity. Bean sandwiches represented the philosophy that good food did not require money, only creativity and care. Those were 60 soul food snacks that used to be everywhere and now live mostly in memory. If your grandmother made something that was not on this list, drop it in the comments, because somebody out there is looking for that exact recipe. And if this brought back a taste you had not thought about in years, hit subscribe so you never miss another trip back to that kitchen.